He bit through the last man's throat before the others could scream. Sergeant Daniel McGraw crouched barefoot in the underbrush, body shaking from blood loss, broken ribs grinding with every breath. He gripped a stolen Arisaka rifle in one hand, its wood slick with humidity and blood. Behind him, 23 Japanese soldiers lay. Dead, some shot, some stabbed, some strangled in the dark. It was dawn. He hadn't eaten in 6 days. 6 nights earlier, McGraw had been a prisoner, dragged half-conscious through a cave mouth by enemy scouts outside Biak's eastern ridge. They'd beaten him until his teeth cracked. Now here he was, filthy, starving, wounded, and every one of them was dead. The 163rd Infantry Regiment had sent McGraw's patrol to scout Tibdi Pocket. On June 2, 1944, what they didn't know, Japanese holdouts were massing in a cave network the army hadn't charted. By sundown, his squad was missing. By sunrise, command assumed them all dead. Most were, but McGraw didn't die. They stripped him, tied him with jungle vine, hung him from the ceiling of a volcanic chamber. Each hour brought pain bamboo slivers under nails, fists to the kidneys, canteens poured slowly over cracked lips. They wanted to know where the Americans would strike next. He didn't answer. Not on day 1, not on day 5. By day 6, his body stopped trembling. His captors thought he'd died. He hadn't. The jungle was quiet now. Morning fog licked the leaves like smoke after gunfire. He rose slowly, careful not to reopen the wound on his left foot. A bone stuck out near the ankle, probably broken. Didn't matter. He could still stand. He still had bullets. They'd left him to rot. Instead, he'd tracked them, waited, struck when there. Rifles were down and their boots were off. 1 knife, 1 pistol, then a stolen rifle. He didn't stop for 3 hours. McGraw wiped his face. Mud, sweat, blood. Couldn't tell what was whose anymore. He looked down the trail. There would be more. The jungle wasn't done yet, but neither was he. 7 days earlier, the sky over Biak Island pulsed with heat. Jungle steam rose like smoke off the ground. Sergeant Daniel McGraw wiped sweat from his brow and glanced back at the 3 men following him down the Ibdi Trail. It was June 2nd, 1944. Their orders were simple. Scout the ridge for signs of enemy activity. Mark cave mouths. Report back by sundown. Standard recon. The 163rd Infantry Regiment had taken heavy losses the week before pushing up from Makmur Ridge. McGraw's squad was one of the few still operating with all men standing for in total, including himself. He didn't like the odds. Each man carried a full load, M1 rifles, 2 grenades, field rations, and 3 canteens. Jungle. Silence felt heavier than usual. No birds, no insects, just their boots sinking into black volcanic dirt and the occasional rustle of branches. At 1,400 hours, they passed a burned-out Stuart tank half swallowed by moss. McGraw marked the location grid to 8, probable past ambush site. Nearby, the body of a Japanese soldier lay face down in the mud, bloated from days of rain. One eye socket was empty. Private Garcia gagged quietly but said nothing. McGraw didn't. Stop, that was the job. Move. See, survive. Up ahead, the trail forked. Left descended into bamboo scrub. Right angled toward a dry wash and higher ground. Textbook doctrine said choose elevation for visibility. But caves meant ambush. Caves meant enemy. That meant answers. McGraw signaled left. They pushed deeper, bamboo closing in. The light dimmed. Visibility dropped to 10 feet. McGraw felt the pressure in his chest tight, electric. This was the part you didn't train for. The breath before. Then came the sound barely audible. A pop. The explosion was small, localized. Claymore-style trap, likely handmade. Corporal Stevens vanished in a blast of dirt and fire. His torso folded backward. Garcia screamed. Bullets erupted from above, snapping twigs and punching through leaves. The jungle had come alive. McGraw of left rolled down a shallow slope. His rifle skidded into brush. A round grazed his helmet. He yanked a grenade from his belt but never threw it. Because everything stopped. Silence. He peeked over the embankment. Garcia was down. So was Private Langston. Only McGraw remained and his position was exposed. He began to crawl. That's when he heard it. Footsteps, close, behind. He turned. A boot slammed into his chest. Pain shot through his ribs. Before he could raise a hand, the butt of a Japanese rifle cracked against his skull. Everything went black. He woke to flickering firelight. A low, sulfurous stench. Stone ceiling. Voices Japanese. McGraw tried to move. His arms wouldn't respond. Something bit into his wrists. Rope. Vines. He was stripped down 2 undershorts. Gear gone. A man stepped forward, younger than expected. eyes cold. He spoke softly in Japanese, then drew a knife from his belt and pressed it against McGraw's collarbone. He didn't cut, not yet. He didn't know how long he'd been unconscious the second time. Hours maybe, a day. Time didn't move in the caves, only pain did. When McGraw opened his eyes, he saw flickering light torches set into rocky sconces along the walls. Smoke clung to the ceiling, curling in thick, choking tendrils. The air tasted like ash and copper. He tried to sit up, but his chest screamed. His ribs, at least two, were cracked or broken. His wrists were tied behind him with coarse vine, the fibers digging deep into swollen skin. Someone had removed his boots, belt, and undershirt. All he had left were torn fatigue pants and a pulsing headache. 3 men stood across the chamber, silhouettes against the flame. One wore a sword, officer maybe. The others carried bayonets. They didn't speak, just watched, waiting. The officer stepped forward, crouched beside him, and studied McGraw's face. Then, in clear English, he asked, "Where is your artillery?" McGraw said nothing. The officer backhanded him across the cheek, quick, casual, then asked again, "Where is your artillery?" Still nothing. What followed wasn't dramatic, it was mechanical. The bayonets didn't cut, they pressed. Lightly, deliberately, they slid under his fingernails, carved shallow lines into his thighs. The officer knelt beside him, holding a map drawn on rice paper. He pointed to the map, then jabbed the blade into McGraw's side, not deep but enough. "Tell us where they will strike." He didn't answer. They poured water over his head, cupped his mouth shut, then let him breathe just long enough to cough before doing it again. His hands went numb, his toes cramped. They worked in shifts, one interrogator replacing another every hour. Never yelling, always calm. The professionalism of cruelty. By the second day, he could no longer lift his head. By the third, he stopped counting. They broke a rib with a bamboo rod, dislocated his shoulder. One guard urinated on his leg and laughed. Another offered water, then poured it out in front of him. He bit his tongue until it bled just to stay awake. On day 4, he hallucinated his brother's voice calling from the cornfields back home in Colorado. He saw his mother in the torchlight, holding out a glass of lemonade. Day 5, he tried to remember how many men were left in his platoon. How many were still alive? The number kept changing. By day 6, they left him alone. His body had stopped twitching. His breathing had slowed. From a few feet away, he must have looked dead. He wasn't. He lay there in the dark, eyes barely open, heart hammering slow and steady. They thought he was broken. He was counting. Not hours, not days, footsteps. Every time they walked by, 1, 2, 3. One of them always carried a rifle. The others did not. By the morning of day 6, he could feel the moment his captors decided he was no longer worth keeping alive. No more water. No more questions. The guards didn't even bother to look at him. They muttered as they passed, laughed sometimes. One flicked a cigarette at his leg. Another kicked dirt in his face. That night, the torches burned lower. Fewer footsteps echoed through the cave. Most of the Japanese had moved out, probably toward the ridgeline, maybe into new tunnel networks the Americans hadn't found yet. They left one man behind. He wasn't armed, just sat near the mouth of the cave, smoking and muttering to himself. McGraw watched. Through half-lidded eyes, unmoving, barely breathing. It was now or never. His wrists had swollen to twice their size. The vines had dried slightly. That was the trick. He shifted his weight, used his own thigh bone to grind the fibers against the rock floor. Back and forth, 30 minutes, maybe more. Pain lanced through his shoulders. He bit his tongue to stay silent. The moment the knot gave, it felt like a bone snapping. His left arm fell limp. He flexed his fingers, couldn't feel them. Didn't matter. He waited. The lone guard stepped out to relieve himself. That gave McGraw 30, maybe 40 seconds. He rolled onto his knees and crawled toward the nearest pile of gear. 2 feet, 4, 8. Every inch was agony. Ribs grinding, skin tearing. He spotted what he needed. A canteen. The water inside was warm and stale. Best he'd ever tasted. Then he saw it. A Japanese Arisaka rifle, leaning against the wall near the fire. 8 round. Internal magazine. He'd trained with captured models. Slow bolt. Loud as hell, but better than fists. He reached it, fingers trembling. The guard returned. McGraw didn't hesitate. He swung the rifle like a club, striking low behind the knees. The man collapsed with a gasp. McGraw lunged forward, using his full body weight to drive the buttstock into the man's face. Once, twice, again. Blood pooled under the man's chin, still breathing. McGraw took the man's knife. finished it quickly. Then silence. He waited. Another full minute. No movement in the tunnel. He slid the rifle's bolt open, found 5 rounds already inside. Japanese cartridges, Type 99. He knew the recoil would hammer his broken ribs, but it didn't matter. He crawled outside. The jungle was black and humid. No moon. Every leaf glistened with sweat. Crickets chirped. The trail ahead was narrow but walked. He could see fresh boot prints. He went barefoot. Quiet. He followed them. Every few feet, he dropped to his belly and listened. The jungle talked. He knew how to listen. Branches swayed. Men laughed ahead. Campfire smoke drifted on the wind. He counted again. 1, 2, 3. He wasn't running. He was hunting. The trail curved downhill toward a narrow ravine thick with banyan roots and creeping vines. McGraw moved in short bursts, scrawl, crouch, listen. Every few minutes he stopped and pressed his ear to the dirt. Distant voices floated on the air, rising and falling like waves. He followed them. Barefoot, injured, ribs splintered, left foot. Nearly useless, he moved anyway. They'd taught him that in basic. You don't stop moving. Not unless you want to die. The Japanese soldiers ahead were part of a patrol unit. He could tell from the cadence of their movement, the scattered formation, the way they didn't bother with noise discipline. This wasn't their first time in the jungle, but they weren't expecting anything behind them, especially not a ghost. He kept 30 yards back, close enough. 2 track, far enough to vanish. When they paused to piss or light cigarettes, he dropped behind a tree root and waited. Twice, a straggler lagged behind just long enough to tempt him. Both times he stayed down. Not yet, he needed an opportunity. One clean strike. It came after nightfall. The patrol reached a jungle clearing. 23 men, loosely encamped. No guard rotation posted yet. They stacked rifles against a banyan tree and dropped their packs with audible groans. McGraw watched from a ridge just above the camp, hidden behind tall ferns. He had 5 bullets, 1 rifle, 1 knife. They had the advantage, but they were tired, unaware. He waited until the first man peeled away to urinate in the trees. McGraw struck like a falling branch, silent, fast, final. He drove the knife into the man's throat, pulled the body into the underbrush, and stripped it of gear, belt, extra cartridges, 2 grenades, canteen. He held his breath, waited. No reaction from camp. Then another man stepped away, grumbling, lighting a cigarette. Same result. McGraw was methodical. Over the next 2 hours, he picked off 6 more, always the ones who wandered too far, always dragging the body away. He stacked them near a tree, hidden under leaves. By midnight, only 15 remained. That's when one soldier noticed a missing rifle. McGraw heard the alarm. Shouts, panic, boots thudding on dirt. He acted before they could form a line. He lobbed the first grenade into their fire pit. The explosion lit the clearing in violent orange. Screams erupted. Men scrambled. McGraw dropped 2 more with his rifle center mass, close range. They returned fire blindly into the jungle. He shifted left, firing again. When the bolt clicked dry, he charged the nearest man with the knife. They grappled. Blood sprayed. He didn't stop. He didn't think. He moved. He killed. When the silence returned, he stood alone, chest heaving, soaked in sweat and blood. He counted again, 23. He didn't stop to count the wounds. His left hand shook uncontrollably. Blood ran in dark lines down his forearm, dripping from his fingertips. A bayonet slash across his ribs stung with each breath, and the skin on his right knee had been flayed down to the bone. But he could still walk, sort of. The Arisaka rifle was empty now. Its bayonet snapped. Useless. He tucked it under a tree root, wrapped it in leaves. No time to bury it. He had no idea where he was, just that the trail back to Makma Ridge had to be east. The sun would rise soon. If he didn't move now, he wouldn't move at all. This was the part no one trained you for. What to do when the war doesn't end after the killing. What to do when your legs say no, but the jungle says run. He took 1 step, then another. The ground tilted. He nearly fell into a ravine, regained his footing by sheer will. The jungle stretched in every direction, endless green and rot and noise. Every root clawed at his bare feet. Every leaf whispered movement. He expected gunfire, a patrol, anything. Nothing came. That terrified him more. By mid-morning, the heat rose like a fist. The humidity pressed down like a wet canvas. McGraw stumbled into a stream and drank until he vomited. He wiped his mouth and drank again. He moved when the insects swarmed, when the ants bit his ankles, when the jungle wouldn't let him lie still. He passed 3 more trails, all too clean, too quiet, traps, maybe, or patrol zones. He avoided them. He chose the terrain that hurt the most: thorns, lava rock, razor grass, because no one sane would go that way. By afternoon, he found a shredded ammo box buried beneath a collapsed palm. American markings, faded, but there. He knew. Then he was close. He turned uphill, climbing hand over hand, teeth clenched against the scream building in his chest. Then a sound. Not boots, not Japanese. Shovels, voices, low, tired, cursing. He dropped to his knees, raised his hands, and screamed just once. Two American soldiers froze mid-step. One dropped his shovel. The other reached for his rifle, then stopped, eyes wide. "Jesus Christ," the man said. "You're supposed to be dead." McGraw fell forward, unconscious before he hit the dirt. He woke screaming. Not words, just sound raw and jagged, from deep inside. McGraw thrashed against. The hands trying to hold him down. In his mind, he was still in the cave, still bound, still bleeding. The knife was coming again, but the hands didn't strike. They held. A voice called out, sharp and calm. "Hold him, don't let him tear the stitches." Light stabbed his eyes. Cold touched his skin. He blinked hard, canvas above him. A cot under him. The smell of iodine and morphine. American voices, safe. But the jungle wasn't done. For days, he drifted in and out, fever spiking, heart racing. Medics worked around the clock. They stitched his abdomen, reset his foot, wrapped his ribs. In gauze and tape, the burns on his back were cleaned with sulfur soap. He kept seeing them. The faces, the blade, the fire. Sometimes he screamed. Other times he stared through people like glass. After 5 days, he could drink broth without choking. On the 6th, he sat up. His first words, "How many did I kill?" They didn't believe him at first. Not the medics, not the officers. 23. Alone. No rifle team, no backup, no shoes. Then a recon patrol found the bodies exactly where he said they'd be. 23 Japanese soldiers, spread across a clearing like scattered dolls. Some shot, some stabbed, some with crushed skulls. It wasn't just the kills, it was what he remembered. Positions, ammo pouches, a map, the location of a cave entrance stuck behind a false rock wall, the same system that had swallowed his entire squad a week before. That changed everything. Engineers brought in explosives. Flame teams followed. Over the next 72 hours, they cleared the final enemy position at Ibdi Pocket and underground. A labyrinth where hundreds of Japanese troops had been preparing for a last stand. Thanks to McGraw, they never got the chance. He slept through most of it. His body demanded it, but word spread. Someone whispered to the regimental commander. Someone else told the division staff. A third hand carried it to the rear lines, then to the officers' tents. The man who came back was the man they thought dead. The man who killed 23. Men saluted him now. Nurses looked away when he met their eyes. Someone pinned a medal to his cot, but he didn't remember who. He didn't ask for it. All he wanted was the map returned, the one they took from his pocket, drawn in charcoal on a scrap of uniform. He asked for it 3 times. Finally, a corporal found it smeared but readable. McGraw took it and stared for a long time. "It's not finished," he muttered. He wasn't talking about the drawing. They moved him under cover of night. Stretcher, canvas, 2 men carry his body swaddled in gauze and silence. No headlights, no talking. Even in safety, the officers didn't want word getting out. Not yet. They called it a medical evacuation. In truth, it was an extraction. From the regimental aid station, he was flown to Hollandia, then routed to a field hospital near Brisbane. He was unconscious for most of it. His body shut down twice mid-flight. Fever over 104. Pulse erratic. Surgeons debated whether to amputate his left foot. Too many broken bones. Too little circulation. They didn't. He kept it. When he came to, the world felt slower, blurry at the edges. His first thought wasn't the pain. It was the silence. No cicadas. No boots crunching dirt. No shouting. Just the beeping of machines and the soft rustle of nurses' steps. He asked for water. They gave him morphine. For 2 weeks, he said nothing. He stared out the window at trees that didn't look like jungle. Slept. Woke. Slept again. His arms grew thinner. His ribs more visible. At night, he bit his knuckles to stop the screams. Then, slowly, he spoke. Fragments at first. Patrol route. Cave entrance. Timing. He described the ridgeline, the smell of bat guano, the way voices carried underground. He drew diagrams on napkins, scratched coordinates onto his sheets. The intel reached by Akinwave's hand, delivered by couriers who hadn't yet seen combat. Within days, field engineers confirmed. A new entrance, one no one had spotted before. The Japanese had been preparing a secondary stronghold, one that could have collapsed the American push entirely. McGraw had stumbled through its outer perimeter, memorized it, escaped it. Now, because of him, they could destroy it. They did. On June 18th, elements of the 41st Division sealed the last of the Ibdi caves with demolitions. Over 140 Japanese soldiers were entombed inside. No shots fired. No American losses. The operation lasted 3 hours. It should have taken weeks. Back in Australia, McGraw watched it unfold on a map laid across his lap. A young lieutenant explained the outcome, tried to thank him. McGraw nodded once, didn't speak. He was already staring at something else. A small cloth satchel the nurse had returned that morning. Inside was a blood-soaked strip of uniform, charcoal still visible. The map he'd drawn half-conscious, clutched in his hand when they'd found him. Creased, wrinkled, still intact. He traced the lines with a bandaged finger. He didn't smile, didn't cry, just stared. The lieutenant asked if he wanted to go home. McGraw said nothing for a moment, then soon. Because for men like him, the war didn't end when the killing stopped. It ended when they stopped seeing the jungle every time they closed their eyes. The Army sent him home in late August 1944, not with parades, not with bands. Just a seat on a medical transport, a bundle of papers stamped classified, and orders not to discuss what happened on Biak. He returned to Colorado in a wheelchair, ribs still healing, leg wrapped to the knee. The train rolled into a station no one knew to greet. The war wasn't over, not for anyone. He stayed at his brother's house just outside Pueblo, slept on a cot in the garage, close to the tools, away from the chatter. Nights were the hardest. His body twitched in his sleep. His screams brought neighbors. Once he woke up under the porch, curled around a trenching shovel like it was a rifle. The VA called him twice. He ignored the letters. He couldn't explain what he didn't understand. They offered medals. He refused them, not out of pride. Out of silence, in October, he drove to the family of Corporal Stevens, the first man lost on the patrol. Knocked twice. When the door opened, he introduced himself by name, nothing more. He handed them a box. Inside, Stevens's dog tags, cleaned, a note. He was brave. I'm sorry. He visited Garcia's family next, then Langston's. 3 times the conversation stopped with tears. 3 times he said the same thing. I made it out. They didn't. He never said how. Not once. By winter, McGraw got work at a mechanic's shop. Hands steady enough to turn a wrench. Eyes sharp enough to spot a crack in a gasket from 10 feet away. No one questioned the limp. No one asked about the scars. In 1946, he married a waitress named Lillian. They rented a house near a gravel pit and planted sunflowers along the fence. Never had kids. Never spoke about why. He didn't go to reunions. Didn't write war stories. When neighbors talked about Europe, about D-Day or Italy, he nodded politely, said little. But every June he vanished for a weekend, just drove. No one knew where. Not until 1983, when his name appeared in a declassified footnote in an Army field report. Intelligence obtained from an escaped prisoner led to the final neutralization of the Ibdi Cave complex on Biak Island. Source, unnamed Sergeant, 163rd Infantry. That same year, a local historian tracked him down, asked for an interview. McGraw declined. He did, however, send back a single envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn map, yellowed with time, still marked with blood smudges and rough charcoal lines. No note, no name, just one sentence scribbled on the back. They should have made it home, too. Daniel McGraw never sought recognition. After the war, he worked in silence, first as a mechanic, then later maintaining road graders. For the County Highway Department, it was quiet work, steady, honest. That's what he wanted. Something without gunfire, something that didn't scream in the dark. He and Lillian lived in a 1-story brick house just outside Cannon City. She worked the diner. He fixed whatever broke: lawnmowers, radios, transmissions. They kept to themselves. Every spring, he planted rows of sunflowers in the back. Every fall, he burned the stalks down to the dirt. Neighbors remembered him as polite, quiet, always. Kind to animals. He never mentioned the jungle. In 1962, he lost part of his hearing. A delayed result of the explosions, doctors said. In 1971, he was diagnosed with chronic pain disorder. By 1980, his knees had gone. He still refused the VA's disability check. They don't owe me, he told Lillian once. I made it back. She passed in 1985. Cancer. He didn't remarry, didn't move, just kept the house in perfect order, cut the lawn with military precision, repainted the fence every Memorial Day. In 1994, A local vet group offered to honor him at a county fair. He declined. Others did more, he said. They just didn't live to tell you about it. That was McGraw's code. When he died in 1999, aged 78, the local paper ran a 3-sentence obituary. No mention of service. No medals listed. Just a line about his kindness and his love of sunflowers. 2 weeks later, a historian reviewing declassified combat files noticed the same hand-drawn map now preserved at the Army Heritage Collection. The one marked in faded charcoal and blood. The signature. DM, there was no doubt. Daniel McGraw had been the unnamed sergeant. He never told his story. He didn't need to. Because what mattered wasn't how many he killed. It was how many came home because he didn't give up. Composite disclosure. While Sergeant Daniel McGraw is a composite drawn from records of the 163rd Infantry Regiment during the Battle of Biak, the 23 men who died in the caves and jungle were very real. Their names include Staff Sergeant Henry Dobson Keir, June 6, 1944. Empty Pocket Corporal James Kearney Keir, June 5, 1944. East Caves Private First Class Raymond Tellis Keir, June 7, 1944. Mockmer Ridge. Their stories weren't recorded. Their lives ended without headlines, but their sacrifice helped turn the tide in the Pacific. And now, because you listened, they won't be forgotten. The sources that made this account possible include